This is Child Abuse Awareness Month, and if you're not already aware of the prevalence of children being abused, well, let me cite a couple of alarming statistics. Every 6 seconds, a child is abused somewhere in this vast country of ours, and 5 children die each and every day as a result of abuse. Many of them are under the age of 4. The latest statistic, sadly, was recorded just this past week in Queens. Police say little Bella Edwards died at the hands of a family member. Corey Chambers and Henry Rossoff have the story.
Police say Bella Edwards was the victim of abuse that ended in her murder. Abuse at the hands of her stepfather, Mark Jenkins. Our cameras weren't allowed in court, but Bella's family members were, screaming things like, "Feed him to the wolves" and "monster," as prosecutors detailed the vicious assault that happened on Monday. Those heartbroken family members joined a heartbroken community, mourning a life lost too soon to an unbelievably heinous attack.
There were signs of sexual abuse, and her stepfather was performing CPR when paramedics arrived at this apartment building off Beach 105th Street.
Bella was a beautiful soul, vibrant. That's how everybody remember her. That's how y'all gonna remember her. We're gonna make sure that y'all remember her. We're gonna remember her. We're gonna get justice. Know that. We're gonna get justice. This is not over. It's not gonna end today. It's not gonna end no time soon until we know what happened.
Bella's mother, Shamika Gonzalez, messaged me on Facebook writing, "Bella was a friendly, beautiful, affectionate, smart, and lovable, and the best daughter anyone can ask for. She loved and was very affectionate sister to her baby brother, Logan. She was loved by many who came to know her." At a darkly coincidental walk for child abuse prevention in Brooklyn, Administration for Children's Services Commissioner David Hansel would not comment on the details of Bella's case or previous history with the family, but did add,
"This just underscores how important an issue child abuse is, how it's something that all of us in New York City need to pay attention to. It takes all of us to make sure that all kids in New York City are safe."
Thanks to Corey and Henry for that report. And as the commissioner pointed out, the goal is to keep our kids safe. But unfortunately, we've reported too many similar stories at a very time abuse, child abuse, appears to be on the rise. My guest this morning is Steve Simpson. He's a child abuse survivor who is now a child advocate, and he speaks nationally about the issue and how to best deal with it. He's also the author of this new book, Who Am I? The Teenage and Young Adult Survival Handbook. It's a novel and actually a nonfiction story as well. So welcome, it's good to have you with us. This is a book within a book.
Yes, it is.
It's a way to lure the kids into something that's interesting and a story that's fiction.
Exactly, because if you just try to give the handbook to someone, you're putting a spotlight on the child, and any teacher would tell you they're not going to ask for it. The fact that the handbook is within a fiction book, it kind of camouflages it.
Interesting.
It allows a child to get it without being embarrassed.
Okay, interesting. Let's get to the heart of this whole story.
Yes.
I noted that child abuse is on the rise. It's alarming. We have all these statistics. Why is it so prevalent now?
One of the biggest reasons is that the number one cause of child abuse, not 100%, but the number one cause is alcoholism and drug abuse. And alcoholism and drug abuse has increased, and that's on the rise. And when you have addictions on the rise, child abuse goes right along with it. Being that one of the parents or step-parents will be an alcoholic, and in their rage or they're being high and drunk, they will abuse. Like, that's what happened to me. My father was a very violent alcoholic. So unfortunately, that's the main reason why it's on the rise.
Now, little Bella Edwards, we saw those pictures of an adorable, beautiful young girl, and she seemed to be so happy, yet she apparently was living a hellish nightmare. Why didn't anyone see this?
Well, two things. Now, with myself, I was the class clown. Okay, I was making jokes all the time, starting up, interrupting the classroom, all this energy. So you wouldn't think, well, this kid can't be getting abused. In fact, I was told I should be disciplined at home. They thought I lacked discipline. But it was a show. And I acted that way because at home I was being abused. So again, it does camouflage it. But I will say this to you, Marvin. In most cases, I have to say this from all my volunteer work over the years and knowing other abuse victims, within the household it is known. In most families, there's the abuser and there's a non-abusing codependent parent. And the codependent parent sees the abuse, and they keep thinking it's going to change, it's not going to get better, whether it's their fear of being alone, they don't want to be separate, it's the economics, and they allow it to happen. And in fact, there are times when they'll even say to the abused victim, such as myself, well, don't do that anymore, and he won't do that, or try to stay out of his way. And the child actually internalizes it and thinks it's their fault they're being abused. Another reason they won't report it. You know, the two biggest reasons a child will not report their abuse: one, they think they deserved it. They were told they deserved it. For me, from the day I can remember, my father told me.
Diminish your value.
Exactly. Exactly. This is your fault because of who you are. The second reason, which most people don't hear this point, the second reason they don't report it is the child doesn't say something because they're afraid of getting the non-abusing parent in trouble. They're actually trying to protect the parent who's not protecting them.
That's the reason for the silence. Let's try and be helpful here. For someone who managed to survive, what are the symptoms? How can you recognize that a child is being abused? You saw little Bella there, a smile, happy child. No one suspected anything. What are the warning
There are
signs?
certain triggers. Okay, let's say you have a young child and they have their friends over. And you notice that one of their friends, every time you might raise your voice, they get very taken back by it. They can't handle that. Or maybe you have a dispute with your wife, okay? But they go in a corner, they walk away from it. They're expecting you to beat your wife. That's what they're expecting. So the reaction to a child to a loud voice, that was big with me. I'd leave immediately. Something.
So other signs, I'm just looking for the symptoms.
Okay,
Give me a thumbnail sketch of that.
Signs: not looking an adult in the eye a lot. A lot of child, like I got hit in the face constantly, so I would not look my teachers in the eyes. That's another big sign. Overreacting, because you can internalize it. In other words, if a child says something, you hit the child. All of a sudden the kid, there's no reason to hit the child for that. Now they're acting the way their parents act. So you have to look to the child's reactions to things. The obvious, of course, is bruises and so on, but that could be hidden. We both know that.
So it may not be the physical signs, but a child's behavior can also be telltale.
Absolutely. I was always acting out in class. I spoke off the record to a special ed teacher once, not too long ago, actually. And I said, in your special ed class, what percentage do you think they're really just abused kids in this class or kids of alcoholic parents? She said half. They have no learning disabilities. They're getting abused at home. I can't prove it. One of the parents is an alcoholic, or at least verbally abused, which, by the way, is just as deadly as physical abuse.
I wanted to ask you about that.
You're going to say, how can that be? Very easy. I was suicidal when I was 11 years old. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't from the physical abuse. It was from the verbal. It was from hearing for 11 years how useless I was, how hopeless everything is. It's never going to get better. And I had it. And I have to tell you something. You mentioned 5 children die a day from child abuse, from physical abuse. It's going to be more. Because if you added the number of suicides, and there's a lot, that were because they were being verbally abused, and add that to the number, that number would probably double. Except that it gets hidden under the rug, because when a child commits suicide, what do you tend to hear people say? Well, they had a lot of problems, or we don't know why they really did it. And no one gets up in the morning and decides to commit suicide. It's from years of built-up hopelessness.
Steve, I want to talk further. What can people do? We understand where the non-abusive parent is quiet, why the child is quiet, but what can neighbors do who observe things? I want to explore
It's
that.
funny
First,
you said
we got to
that.
take a break.
Okay.
I want to pick up on that when we come back. Stay with us as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Back with Steve Simpson, we're talking about the prevalence of child abuse. His book, Who Am I? A Survival Guide for Those Who Are Abused. We talked before about why a non-abusive parent does not speak out, why a child doesn't speak out. But what about those who are living nearby, relatives and neighbors next door to someone like a Bella Edwards, who was so abused and murdered?
You know, it's funny. If you put your garbage out on the wrong night or park in the wrong spot, the neighbor's going to call 911 on you. When it comes to a child abuse, they don't want to get involved. And what I say to those neighbors is, if you don't get involved, you're aiding and abetting that child abuse. Be a hero, okay? Get involved with the child abuse. And there's also relatives, grandparents, aunts and uncles. Again, they're protecting the abuser. Why don't I call the police? Because, you know, what if they take the child away? And they let it continue. And I have to tell you, if that child does get to the point of being killed by it, then the guilt is there. And even if the child doesn't die like this poor young girl, as that child gets older, their life is going to be a mess. They're going to be abusive themselves in relationships.
At 30%.
30%.
Of those who, I read the figure, 30% of abused or neglected children will later abuse their own children.
And if they don't become an abuser, they get in relationships with their abused. Okay, and that's very common. And another thing, too, is it carries with them. You see many celebrities have committed suicide, and they'll say in their tweets or their letters, it's because of the abuse when I was a child. So even if a parent says, hey, you know, my daughter does great in school, and I'm not going to bring her to therapy, and everything's fine, you might wake up one day and have a nightmare on your hands. It stays inside you and eats you up if you don't get help.
Steve, look at our viewers right now, those who might be out there who are being abused or are aware of someone who's being abused. What would you say to them? How can your survival, your teenage and young adult survival handbook be beneficial to them?
One of the things I stress to anyone is it's not your fault. I woke up every day thinking it was my fault. I was so guilty, you know, I deserved this. And I joined a self-help group, okay, and I realized in that self-help group that other kids who were better students than me, they were abused too. The same things were told by them. So the answer is this to any young person watching. It's not you. If somebody else was their son or somebody else was their daughter, your parent would still abuse them. It's not your fault. And you're not going to get your other parent in trouble. You're going to get them help by you getting help.
Okay, tell those folks out there who are really concerned about this, right? What can they do about it? What should they be doing?
If they're in school, they should immediately speak to the school social worker or school psychologist. They're trained for this. They have resources, okay? So number one, go right to the school social worker, school psychologist. If you don't know who they are, ask your teacher, I need to see this person. That's important.
But we're talking about most of these cases of being under 4. Those who have died, many of them under the age of 4, not even in school.
Well, in those cases, I again rely on the relatives and neighbors. I'm going to tell you something, Marvin. No one doesn't know what was happening. I'm sorry, it's a tragic situation. I'm not trying to go after anyone, but the point is, in this case, I think there were bruises. There were older bruises as well. I don't know any child abuse case that suddenly spontaneously happened. It always happens for a while. So I need these other parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents and neighbors to wake up and say, you don't want to see this child in the news. Be a hero, be an adult, and get help for them. Call the authorities, and they'll walk you through how to do it.
And your survival guide? What's the best advice comes out of there, aside from what you've already pointed out?
Hope that things can change. I always thought, the reason why I was suicidal was I thought that things are never going to change anyway. Things can change. They can change faster than you think they can change. And I give all sorts of resources of what to go to try to change them, whether it's websites, whether it's community centers, even churches. Churches are a wonderful place with 12-step programs that are free, self-help groups, outreach programs. There's so many things there. And the biggest thing is, I keep saying the change comes in fast. I know a lot of people that were suicidal, and the ones that never committed, so didn't die, 100% are glad they never died. Why? Things got better. So I try to point out that things can get better. You just have to take a deep breath, say a prayer, and take that first step, okay? And there's plenty of people out there to help you, plenty of organizations that will help you.
Like what? Give us.
Well, one of the biggest organizations I love is the National Runaway Switchboard. Okay.
National Runaway Switchboard.
Because they deal more than just running away, and it's 1-800-RUNAWAY. 1-800-RUNAWAY. They call it actually the National Runaway Safe Line. Great organization, because many kids are abused when they get older will run away. That's what I did also. And they can get you to a safe haven. They'll make a phone call for you. They'll call an aunt that you're embarrassed to calling and try to get you help. There's the National Suicide Hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. All these organizations are equipped. And of course, every county has a protective services and for the abuse.
Okay. Steve Simpson, thank you very much. And if
My
people want to
pleasure.
get your book, Who Am I? The Teenage and Young Adult Survival Handbook, that's available on Amazon.com.
Absolutely.
Correct? Okay, thank you very much for your guidance and your insight.
Thank you for having
Good
me.
to have you with us.